This book is absolutely brutal. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Harry's Book Cafe. Today we're going to talk about Scott Smith's The Ruins. So this book is first featured in the August TBR. I wanted to read that book in that episode. And I first heard about this particular book when I was searching the most disturbing books on YouTube. And this is one of the books that has come up. So I read the synopsis and I'm really interested, so I thought I'd give it a try. I've never heard of Scott Smith, so first time reading his book, and I have to say I'm really impressed with this book. So this review is going to break down into two parts. The first is about the synopsis, about the plot, the story itself, and the second part we're going to talk a little bit more about the writing, the style of the book. I think it warrants a little bit more attention than that. So the story involves in 6 young people who went to Mexico for holiday, and there are 1 German, 4 Americans, and 1 Greek. And I promise this is not a people walking into a pub sort of joke. No. So these 6 young people, by chance, they went to this really weird place in the middle of the jungle and surrounded by the native people who lived a rather primitive sort of life. And they went up to this hill where their final destination is, and the hill was described a very beautiful hill, quite low, covered in plantations and red flowers, and is really stunning sight to behold. And at first those native people surrounded them and tried to persuade them not to go up to the hill, but the language barrier is there, so it's a little bit difficult to communicate, but the body language and everything else was clearly indicative that the natives do not wish those people to go onto the hill. But being young people, that's what they did. So they went up to the hill, and from that moment on, weird things start to happen. Now, instead of persuading them not to go up the hill, those natives then surrounded the hill and refused to let them go. And this refusal is reinforced by arms. So each of them are carrying a bow and arrow, and some of them actually have a gun. So they are not allowed to leave that hill. And so as soon as the first night come along, weird things start to happen. And one of the members of the 6 people suffered a horrendous accident, which rendered him disabled, unable to move. And then weird things start to keep happening. And bear in mind, they can't go. And originally, when they first came out to discover the ruin, they were really planned for a day trip. So they don't have much food, they don't have much water supply. So they are basically stuck. As the water supplies runs low, as the food supply runs low, as the story progresses, you can really see the tension start building in the relationships, and how this relationship started to come apart like a seam in a cheap suit. It starts to just coming apart bit by bit, and the writer did that perfectly. I mean, it's fantastically done. It really can feel how the relationship starting to slowly decay and breaking apart, and that part is just amazingly done. It's after I finished reading this book, the sensation that I felt first and foremost is one of sadness. I don't want to give too much away, so I'm not going to elaborate on why I felt that particular emotion. Suffice to say that it is quite a horrible book in the sense of the story, not in the writing. It is a horror book. I don't think it's disturbing, certainly not the most disturbing. A few people has actually labeled this book as extreme horror, and I completely disagree. It is not an extreme horror. It sits bang on in the middle of a horror genre, and is one of the very finest ones I've read. Yeah, it is just phenomenal, a phenomenal book. The characters development is really, really well done. When you read the book, each character has a different voice, and it's very difficult to actually do that from a writing perspective. The characters certainly have their own characters and lives and personalities, and it's developed really, really well. You have the sense of knowing them, and you have the sense of carrying them, and that's perhaps the most important aspect of the book. The characters, just amazing. There are elements of bodily horror, blood and gore and all that sort of stuff, but not overly done. In the beginning of the part, when they first visited the local village, the Maya village, there's one section involving a dog, and that was quite disgusting. That really made me cringe a little bit. And the bodily horror was necessary. It's not, and that's why it's not extreme horror book, because extreme horror book tends to involve bodily harm that's completely biologically impossible and unnecessary, whereas these ones are completely necessary, and it's not overly done as well. It's really is used sparsely, is used wisely, especially towards the end. There's a lot more bodily horror involved with a character called Eric. Eric perhaps is one of the most tragic characters involved in this, especially towards the end, and there were quite a lot of blood and gore involved him towards the end, but it's not something that will make you cringe. It will make you wince, but not cringing, if you know what I mean. So it's really well done. So that's the book. I loved it. Now let's talk about the writing itself. I read quite a lot of horrors. I like the genre. I read nearly all of Stephen King's books. I think they are amazing. What really sets this one apart is that the writing is lyrical. The language used is succinct and to the point, but at the same time, there are certain sentences, it's almost like you are reading poetry. It's really, really well done. And when you have such a beautiful writing, using such a beautiful writing to write a horrible story, in terms of horrible, what I mean fantastic, but in a horror sense. So when you have such a beautiful writing a subject that's horror, they fuse together. They're in conflict together, but they fuse together, and they come out, metamorphoses into this pleasing oxymoron, which is this book, which is just absolutely phenomenal. I loved it. The writing, I can't praise the writing enough. Never read Scott Smith's book, so this is my first one, and I think this guy can write. The language is lyrical. The sentence construction is just phenomenal. What's another thing quite special about this book, which I've mentioned in the August TBR, is that the book has no chapters. It's just one long continuous text. I didn't like that particular aspect because I don't have a breaking point. I don't have a break point where I can put a book aside and take a break. This one doesn't. It compels you to keep reading, and therefore it makes you a little bit tired in that sense. But I understand why he did it. He tried to create that claustrophobic atmosphere, that tense atmosphere, and I think he largely succeeded. But yeah, that's pretty much it with this book. In the coming weeks and month, especially around October, I'm planning to do a little bit more horror related books. I got a trial on the Amazon Unlimited, and I have downloaded a couple of really, according to YouTube, disturbing books. So I'm wanting to have a try and find out for myself what they're like. So yeah, please stay tuned and subscribe. Have you read this one or any other horror genre suggestions that you can make? That would be absolutely amazing. So please leave those in the comment down below, and also give us a thumb up and subscribe. As I said, for a new channel like mine, any subscriptions, any sort of like are tremendously helpful. So please help us out. But yes, I hope you like this video. Until next time, cheerio.